now to a massive talking point, and the minister who oversaw the courts during the pandemic says that all of the people who are convicted of breaking COVID rules should be given an amnesty. A total of 29,383 people were fined by the courts, and the criminal convictions could stop them becoming teachers or even police officers. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Director of Transform Justice, Penelope Gibbs. Penelope, welcome to the show. So this is a pretty broad piece of legislation. Get rid of the lot of them. But before we go on to whether that's the right thing to do or not, can you give me an indication of how much people were fined? I mean, the fine started at £100 per head, but some of them became massive.
Some people were fined like 10,000, but there was a huge range, and it didn't seem quite clear what were the criteria for the different amounts. But really, really big fines, some of them.
And had serious consequences, as we just said in the intro there, criminal records affecting your ability to do public service jobs, such as teaching and policing. So now on to the big point. Is this the right thing to do? Do you believe, Penelope Gibbs, that we should wipe the slate clean and get rid of all of these fines? After all, the government broke the rules too.
I mean, what I'm not saying is that there's two things. There's a kind of pardon and a wiping the slate clean. I don't think we should pardon people as in say that they didn't commit a crime, because they did commit a crime. But I think where I'm interested is in the criminal records, and whether, given the fact that the law as it was drafted was very vague, quite difficult to understand, and so on, whether it's then justified to have people with criminal records which may last 20, 30 years. It has to be said, they only come up in certain circumstances, but, there shouldn't really be a risk that they come up at all. And this is part of a wider issue for us as part of the Fair Checks campaign to make for a fairer criminal records disclosure system. Because in this country, we disclose to employers and organisations who might want to volunteer things which people did 30, 40 years previously, for which they may not even have been to court. They may have just got a police caution. So I think Robert Buckland is talking within a context of a belief that that our criminal record system is unfair as it stands, and this is an example.
Now, quickly, Sir Robert Buckland is up for re-election. So at the timing of this, you could say slightly cynical. It's a popularity contest, but we're about most likely to have a change of government. Penelope Gibbs, do you think there's an appetite in a future Labour government to make this kind of pardon, to make this kind of change, or is it just politicking, electioneering ahead of a general election?
Well, I actually think Robert Buckland was approached and asked the question and answered it. I'm not absolutely convinced it's electioneering, because actually I think, people are very divided on this issue. So I'm not sure if it's a popularity thing. And Labour people, in my experience, also have a sympathy about the criminal record system and how it's disproportionate and stops people who haven't committed a crime for many, many years from moving on in their lives. So in my experience, there's support across the parties. The Labour Party, I don't think would support a pardon as such, as in saying that person didn't commit an offence they might have committed. But I do think there's a real problem in that the law was, brought in incredibly quickly. Even the police didn't understand it. So I do think a lot of people who broke the law were doing it without really knowing what they were doing, and then were processed through the justice system in quite an unfair way.